This is a previous 40 marker on ethnicity and crime, so the green ethnicity grid. So, outline and explain sociological explanations. Explanations tells me this is a usefulness question because it's got the word explanations. Outline and explain sociological explanations of the relationship between ethnicity and crime. Okay, so unusual for me, but in the introduction, I'm going to note that statistically, black men are 3 times more likely to be stopped and searched. Statistically, black men are 3 times more likely to be stopped and searched, 14 times in Dorset. And under section 60 in 2021, which requires no suspicion. Black men are 18 times more likely to be stopped and searched. So my introduction is statistically black men are 3 times more likely to be stopped and searched under section 60 in 2021, which requires no suspicion. Black men are 18 times more likely to be stopped and searched under this legislation. Stop and search, in 76% of cases, stop and search results in no further action. In 76% of cases, stop and search results in no further action. Some sociologists have argued that the appeared relationship, I need to come back to the question. Some sociologists have argued that the appeared relationship between ethnicity and crime. Some sociologists have argued that the appeared relationship between ethnicity and crime reflects institutional racism and a canteen culture. Some sociologists have argued that this appeared relationship between ethnicity and crime reflects institutional racism and a canteen culture. Other sociological explanations suggest this racism, along with society, might cause higher rates of crime. So outline the stats, and I've addressed the question. There's an appeared relationship between ethnicity and crime. Could be institutional racism and canteen culture, and other sociological explanations suggest that this racism, along with society's racism, that is, might cause higher rates of crime. So I do an outline here. Quite unusual for me, but yeah, I felt comfortable doing the introduction first. So That's the introduction. I've addressed the question and I've outlined what the paragraphs are going to be on. Paragraph 1, we're going to start with useful sociological explanations. Useful sociological explanations have come from reviewing sentencing and punishment. So I'm doing a little bit of an address of the question with sociological, but useful sociological explanations have come from reviewing sentencing and punishments of ethnic minorities. Try and do a tiny little address at the start. Bowling and Phillips argue. Bowling and Phillips argue there is direct and indirect discrimination. Bowling and Phillips argue there is direct and indirect discrimination of black offenders following arrest. They argue there is both direct and indirect discrimination of black offenders following arrest. Black males are more likely to be remanded in custody. Black males are more likely to be remanded in custody before and during a trial. Black men are more likely to be remanded in custody before and during a trial. If subsequently found guilty, these groups are more likely to receive a custodial sentence. This is so I'm just going to put direct discrimination. Okay. Black and Asian groups are more likely to plead not guilty than white groups. Black and Asian groups are more likely to plead not guilty than white groups. As a result of this, this leads to higher sentences. So we've got our direct and our indirect discrimination. Jones and Singer. So I'm taking the same from the same paragraph. Jones and Singer note that the black prison population is 7 times higher than would be expected. So quite short, that one. So those two, black prison population is 7 times higher than would be expected. Yep, so I'm going to do either this shows, so you can separately. So sociological explanation of the relationship between ethnicity and crime. So, where have you moved? This shows. This is a useful explanation. This shows this is a useful explanation to explain the appeared relationship between ethnicity and crime. For them, there appears to be a relationship. So this is a useful sociological explanation to explain the appeared relationship between ethnicity and crime. They can explain why the black prison population, or why black groups receive longer sentences than white. They can explain why black groups receive longer sentences than white, and why the prison population is significantly higher. Significantly higher. This is due to discrimination that results in more prison sentences for black men. Quite wordy, this one, but this shows, look, this is a useful explanation to explain the paired relationship between ethnicity and crime. They can explain why black groups receive longer sentences than white, and why the prison population is significantly higher. This is due to discrimination that results in the prison population, or it results in more prison sentences for black men. So quite wordy, but we have to say what's useful about it and what it can explain here. Evaluation. However, for Mayhew et al., I can't be bothered to do Mayhew, Piper and Wade, Mayhew et al., these sociological explanations do not consider the link between ethnicity and blocked opportunities. These explanations don't consider the relationship between ethnicity and blocked opportunities. And this might mean there is a relationship between ethnicity and crime due to being blocked from money and status. So do you see how in the evaluation we're doing little links back to the question? These explanations aren't useful. They don't consider that there might be a link between ethnicity and crime due to blocked opportunities from money and status. They don't see that. So the evaluation is trying to criticize them, but still come back to the phrasing of the question, because that's what an A grade student will do, or an A star. They'll keep the term of the question, the focus of the terms of the question in every single part of the question, in the knowledge, the this shows, and the however. Okay, paragraph 2. An alternative useful sociological explanation. An alternative useful sociological explanation comes from canteen culture. It's a tiny little link because it's got sociological explanation. Comes from canteen culture. Skolnick argued that a canteen culture is discriminatory attitudes. Canteen culture is discriminatory attitudes that get reinforced as we socialize, or get reinforced as people socialize and chat. This means officers often see potential offenders as young, male and black. It's a canteen culture, these discriminatory attitudes that get reinforced as people socialised. These officers see offenders as young, black and male. For Reiner, a canteen culture is an occupational culture that pervades the police force. It's an occupational culture that pervades the police force, that gets reinforced. It's a culture that pervades the police force, that gets reinforced as groups chat and socialise. It is characterised by macho values, suspicion, and racism. Smith, Gray, and Holdaway all found police accepted the existence of black criminality. They all found police accepted the existence of black criminality, used colour as a criteria for stops. They all found police accepted the existence of black criminality, all used colour as a criteria for stops, and were unapologetic about targeting black groups. So, knowledge. This shows canteen culture is a useful explanation. Canteen culture is a useful explanation to explain why there appears to be a link. Why there appears to be a relationship. Why there appears to be a relationship between ethnicity and crime. This shows canteen culture is a really useful explanation to explain why there appears to be a relationship between ethnicity and crime. This is because police continue to see a relationship and socialize each other. So they explain why there does appear to be a relationship between ethnicity and crime, or they explain why police, I think it's a bit wordy, explain why police see, let's change it a little bit, why police see a relationship between ethnicity and crime. Sorry, folks. Explain why the police appear to see a relationship between ethnicity and crime. So it does explain why the police appear to see a relationship between ethnicity and crime. And this is because they are socialized into a canteen culture. It explains why the police appear to see a relationship between ethnicity and crime. And this is because they're socialized into a canteen culture. It might also explain why officers who are also of colour. It might also explain why officers who are also of colour, why they might target other black men. So why police see a relationship between ethnicity and crime, because they're socialised into a canteen culture, and why officers of colour might also target other black men. It's an issue with socialisation. Again, quite wordy, quite tricky. So, however, Phillips and Brown found no evidence of a canteen culture in their observations. They found no evidence of a canteen culture in their observations. Of 4,700 police stations. They found no evidence of a canteen culture in their observations of 4,700 police stations, which might suggest these sociological explanations are dated and may reflect a historical police culture. Just to tie it in. Okay, it's paragraph 2. Paragraph 3. So we're following the order of the grid, but we are not listing. So paragraph 3. Other sociological explanations. Look at institutional racism. Other sociological explanations look at institutional racism. Hall et al. Found that in the 1970s, media constructed the idea that muggers were typically black. In the 1970s, media constructed the idea that muggers were typically black to disguise, muggers were typically black. The moral panic was created to disguise endemic police racism. Media constructed the idea that muggers were typically black. I might put at a time when muggings were decreasing. I think I might try to highlight the scale of the kind of problematic nature there. But at a time when muggings were decreasing, the moral panic was created to disguise endemic police racism and gain support for increased stop and search powers for police. Really dark idea there. But yeah, moral panic was created to disguise endemic police racism and actually gain public support for increased police stop and search powers. Gilroy denounced black criminality as a myth. Gilroy denounced black criminality as a myth, arguing it is used to justify saturation policing. Denounced black criminality as a myth, arguing it's used to justify saturation policing. the Macpherson inquiry following the murder of Stephen Lawrence concluded that the Metropolitan Police were institutionally racist. So the Macpherson inquiry following the murder of Stephen Lawrence concluded that the Metropolitan Police were institutionally racist, that their policies, procedures, and practices, discriminate against ethnic minority groups. They discriminate against any ethnic minority groups. So all that knowledge, this shows institutional racism. This shows institutional racism. This shows the institutional racism. In both the media and police. So this shows the institutional racism from both the media and police. Explains why in society we have, so the racism from media and police explains why in society we think there's a relationship between ethnicity and crime. Explains why in society we think there is a relationship between ethnicity and crime. So it's racism, which is why we think that there is a relationship between ethnicity and crime. This has been created as a diversionary tactic. This has been created as a diversionary tactic. So this explains why in society we think there's a relationship, and this has been created as a diversionary tactic to hide racism within the police and divert public attention away from other problems or issues in wider society. With the fact that we're even having a discussion about the connection suggests that that moral panic is diversionary. They've made that connection it's a diversionary tactic to hide racism within the police and divert public attention away from other problems or issues within society. Technically kind of continues to happen. Well, yeah, one would argue. However, for Lear and Young, they agree. However, for Lear and Young, they agree with these sociological explanations. These sociological explanations in part. They agree with these sociological explanations in part, but highlight that they cannot explain the increase in material crime or robbery but they agree with them in part, but they highlight that these explanations can't explain the increase in material crime or robbery that in fact there might be a relationship between ethnicity and crime. Again, as the result of blocked opportunities and racism. They don't explain that there was an apparent increase in robbery and material crime by ethnic minority groups. And that, again, for them is largely the result of racism. Okay, that's paragraph 4. Paragraph 5. Oh, sorry, it's paragraph 4. So, left realism discusses ethnicity and crime. Discusses ethnicity and crime. Crime is the result of subcultures or blocked opportunities, relative deprivation or awareness, and marginalization. Which takes place via military policing, street harassment, same thing, via stop and search. So for left realism, or Leah and Young, these are their names. Crime is the result of subcultures, blocked opportunities, relative deprivation, awareness, and marginalization, which takes place via military policing, street harassment, via stop and search. For Nightingale, US black youth have extremely strong consumerist values and desire high status. Have extremely strong consumerist values and desire high status. I think I'm going to mush together the other paragraph. So, unusual, but from the paragraph below, I'm going to add in Gilroy. Am I? No, I'm not. I changed my mind. Sorry, folks. Okay, so I'm going to do those two, and then I'm going to do this shows. This shows realist explanations are useful and can explain. This shows realist explanations are useful and can explain why there appeared to have been an increase in material crime, specifically robbery. They are useful and can explain why there appeared to be an increase in material crime, especially by black groups. in the 1980s. So we need to be very careful, because that does appear that there was an increase in material crime, especially robbery by black groups in the 1980s. But crime stats are very, very, very tricky. So there's been an increase in material crime, especially robbery by black groups in the 1980s. And this might have been the result of blocked opportunities, but also police racism. It might have been the result of blocked opportunities, but also police racism that can be the straw that breaks the camel's back. That's what they argued. It's the police racism, it's the transfer from blocked opportunities, relative deprivation, and the marginalisation of police racism can be the straw that breaks the camel's back. It could be. However, this explanation that clearly links ethnicity and crime could be very damaging. This explanation that's clearly making the link between ethnicity and crime, just checking it's the right language, could be very damaging and add to discrimination and marginalisation. That in itself could add to the discrimination and marginalisation. And Hughes notes that this theory is built on quantitative crime stats. The whole theory is built on quantitative crime stats without looking at any subjective meaning or a micro approach on ethnic groups. Basically what we're saying is the whole theory is based on stats. And it should make you uncomfortable to have to write a paragraph that's suggesting really black groups are much more criminal because of blocked opportunities. It feels uncomfortable because we've just spent 3 massive paragraphs suggesting that it's racism that's creating this appeared link that isn't true, but it's just an appeared link. Most of our sociologists suggesting it's not true. Okay, so paragraph 5 for Gilroy. Crime by black groups represents a political act fighting back against a racist capitalist system. For Gilroy, crime by black groups represents a political act fighting back against a racist capitalist system. And for Hall, crime could be a survival tactic. And for Hall, crime could be a survival tactic. Is a political fighting back against the racist capitalist system. And for Hall, crime could be a survival tactic. It's very short, that one, which is why I wasn't sure whether I should add it to the one above. But I have got a usefulness and a vowel, so I'll get more marks on AO2, AO3. This is a useful explanation. This is a useful explanation and can explain the rise of Rastafarianism in the 1980s. This is a useful explanation and can explain the rise of Rastafarianism in the 1980s. linking ethnicity and deviance, and please put deviance in the little commas. Rastafarians linking ethnicity and deviance. And this could be about young black groups fighting back against police racism, which a lot of it was. So there's the Brixton riots was really about black communities standing up and fighting back against sus laws, so stopping anybody, but about young black groups fighting back against police racism and a continual colonial struggle. And a continual colonial struggle. The Commonwealth, the Commonwealth is the colonial groups of the ex-countries that we colonised, and we still call upon those countries in times of crisis and struggle. So some argue that Commonwealth still, those countries still are there often to support the UK, and that is a continual struggle for some groups. So usefulness, however, for Bryce, these explanations that connect ethnicity and crime don't consider that there are a variety of responses from young black men, many of which are conformist. There's a variety of responses from young black men, many of which are conformist, kind of homogenizing groups, they kind of grouping them together. Okay, conclusion then. To conclude. And here you make a judgment. How good were these explanations? Is there one's better than other? So outline explains sociological explanations of the relationship between ethnicity and crime. So to conclude, there only appears to be a connection between ethnicity and crime. There only appears to be a connection between ethnicity and crime as a result of years of socialization into a canteen culture. There only appears to be a connection between ethnicity and crime as a result of years of socialization into a canteen culture, institutional racism from both media and police, socialization into a canteen culture, institutional racism from both media and police, and both direct and indirect discrimination. And both direct and indirect discrimination. These sociologists' explanations offer a detailed understanding of these issues. They offer a detailed understanding of these issues. And others do consider that racism in society causes locked opportunities, and therefore our understanding of marginalized groups. So to conclude, the fact that there appears to be a connection between ethnicity and crime is just due to socialization. Crime is a result of socialization, institutional racism, and direct and indirect discrimination. These sociological explanations offer a detailed understanding of these issues, and others do consider that racism in society causes blocked opportunities. And therefore, our understanding of marginalized groups is developed by these explanations. Basically, I don't think there's a connection between ethnicity and crime. And most of this essay has argued that that's the case. That's why. And I think the only reason why we have that view is because of years of socialization maybe years of socialization with years of socialization, institutional racism, and direct and indirect discrimination. It's not just the police who would have been socialized into those values. These sociologists offer a detailed understanding of these issues and do consider that racism in society causes blocked opportunities. Therefore, our understanding of marginalized groups is developed by these explanations. And that can only re-socialize us all and ensure we challenge discrimination wherever we are. Basically, I don't think I've done a very good job of explaining that on this video, folks, but I'm trying to say, I think any connection between the two is because we've been socialized to see a connection, because there's wider institutional racism in most sections, if not all. And these explanations offer us an understanding of racism and blocked opportunities. And therefore, we can be re-socialized by educating ourselves, and we challenge discrimination wherever we see it. And that can only be a good thing. So I'm saying they're really good because they highlight the discrimination with racism. They make us more self-aware, and therefore we should be equipped to challenge it. My explanation verbally might have clarified that. So I've tried to go really slow. I've shown you exactly what I would write in this essay. It's tricky and it's wordy, but ethnicity has not come up for quite a while. So I would be very sure you are very confident on this grid and can answer these questions. Thanks, folks.